turning back.
All right. Welcome to the Lost Boy Scouts podcast. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Danny.
Thanks for joining us for episode 7.
Yeah, good to see everybody. It's been quite a week. We've had a lot of good up and downs, and just to recap the week. Tyler and I ran that trail series, the Park City Trail Series, over the weekend, and my first 5K. I've never done anything like that before.
Yeah,
we set a pace that we wanted.
Yeah.
Kind of smashed that out of the water, and then felt it for the next couple of days. My feet still kind of hurt.
Right. Congratulations on your first race, by the way.
Thank you.
It's fun. I could tell competitive Danny comes out.
Yeah, for sure.
A couple hills I was chasing you up. I was like, whoa, Danny's turning it on.
I was telling Misty today, I was like, in my mind, I was like, well, I've never done it before. I got there. I was a little antsy, not that bad. And then once it started, we were both, where should we go? Should we go to the front? Should we go to the second wave? And then we settled on the third wave.
Yeah. And
I realized quickly that we probably should have been, like you thought, further ahead, because
second wave,
we were trying to catch everybody. And
well, it's hard at first, right? Because you're on a trail, right? And you kind of gotta separate people a little bit, and it's make your way through. And the trail conditions, because of all the snow, are already pretty rough.
Right.
So.
And they told us that. They said there's going to be some ruts out there. So I thought about that. But as we started going, we were trying to navigate ourselves. And then we got into a pretty good clip.
Yeah.
And I was looking down and I was like, man, we're going really fast. And our goal was, or I told you my goal would like to be under 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And we had rarely gotten even close to 30 on our training runs. And so as we were going, Tyler kept saying, man, we are doing really good on our pace. Yeah. And we ended up just shy of 30 minutes.
We did.
Both of us. And I think we were in the top 100 of competitors, I think.
Yeah. I think we both were, and we hit our under 30-minute goal. So good for us. You got to push yourself to do hard things.
For sure.
It does say a lot, like the right vibe. You get around the vibe, like,
yeah.
We weren't running 30-minute training sessions. Our training sessions, I think, were a lot harder, but we got around the vibe of everybody else, and it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good experience for myself. I don't think so. We have 2 races left of our series. There's a 10K and then a half marathon. I think is what they call it, a half marathon. Yeah. And both Tyler and I were saying we're still gonna have a goal, but not to be sore the way that I was. I was so sore.
I wanted to, you can't get tattooed next time. I wanted to sit in the canal after.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we couldn't sit in the canal because I had gotten tattooed.
Yeah. And I ran off to open mat because we had a big open mat.
Yeah, down in that day. That's right. You went down there. And so I trained on Sunday, and it was a really good training. And Monday I was so wrecked.
Yeah. And
then Tuesday, I think I felt even worse. And then starting to feel better now, and I feel like we'll start get back to training and get back to running. And so we have we have that coming up. We have our competition on July 8th. So Tyler and I will be doing Grappling Industries with our team, a bunch of guys from the Park City Academy, July 8th, and I think we're both gearing up for that because we're gonna have to run different because they run on Saturday and we compete on Saturday, and we both decided that we're just going to compete, probably do a virtual run. And
nothing compares to the last competition I did as far as soreness.
I remember.
And
it was an interesting, competition is an interesting thing. And that's kind of where I had gone to Tyler about this next episode, because as you guys knew that were listening and that train with us, I was helping my younger son get ready for Worlds, and competition brings out a lot of different feelings, a lot of different emotions for myself, because I've helped both my kids train for some very high level grappling competitions.
Yeah.
My older boy, he tried out for the world team. He went to the world team trials. I coached him in that, and then Tristan with this last one. And it brings out a lot of emotions for me because there's 2 different dads that they got, right? And I told Tyler that it's interesting for me because I grew up without my dad. And so we talked about like where you go as a father, how you grow as a father, you know, and Tristan didn't get to his goal. He wasn't able to make the weight, so we had to cancel the trip, and that in itself brought so much emotions. And so luckily I called Tyler. And
I would imagine, and I've been in similar situations with my son, but like as a father, you know, you can exercise so much external discipline,
right?
And you can give as much as that child needs, but ultimately it's got to come back to the internal discipline.
Right.
And where is the line, right? Like, so the concept of father, today's episode is the father.
The father. Yeah. I always, I tell my kids, you love hanging out with your dad. You love being around your dad. You do not want to see your father.
Yeah.
Your father is the guy that's going to be the disciplinarian. He's going to be the one that you're not going to really get along with that much, because he has to be this stoic figure that has to instill certain characteristics that are required of our children,
right?
Through our own
right. And there's one, we're going to go through several different kind of archetypes of fathers, right? Kind of when we think about daddy, you know, that's the infant stage of child, you know, raising your children. Father is always the disciplinarian.
Always.
You know, there's dad. You know, dad is kind of like, hey, he's the guy you can trust. You can go get information from, kind of the safe, solid figure. You can, you know, and so you have to play these different roles and these different, the different narratives each title of father kind of brings with you. And it's interesting too, because if you look at it from a religious perspective, you have the concept of the father, which is always the disciplinarian. Right. The priest is the father, or the father is this omnipotent person we don't really understand, but we know that all we do is disappoint him.
Yeah. And you wonder, like, if your kids think that is it an attainable level?
Yeah.
Is it an attainable level? Because my boys, they both call me, you know, my older son calls me dad, and Tristan always calls me pops, and he's like, calls me pop, and my pop is this. And I always find that interesting, because my dad called his dad pop.
Yeah.
And in turn, I call my dad pop, even though we don't have a father-son relationship. My dad and I don't really have a father-son relationship, because he was there for a good portion of my youth till I was about 10 years old. And then he was gone, and we almost didn't talk for about 10 years. We didn't speak to each other. And it was an interesting thing to, as a youth, to know, is it attainable? Do you want to be like your father? Do you want to be like your dad? Because there were parts of my dad that I didn't want to be like at all. You know?
Yeah. I think that's it. That's the interesting intertwining of the father-son relationship, right? I came across this cool quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. It says, "What is silent in the father speaks in the son, and is often found in the son, the unveiled secret of the father."
Yeah.
It's kind of heady, right? from German Nietzsche. I was always a fan, because I felt like, you know, if you know who Nietzsche is, you seem super pseudo intellectual.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure. Every time somebody asks you, you're like, oh, I know, I read that.
Yeah. But that's like, you know, what do we pass down to our son? What do we as sons? What do we see? What do we inherit from our fathers? There is kind of this shadow that we inherit, whether we realize it or not. That we inherit from our fathers.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have the father, when we talk about the father archetypes, right? We grew up in a world where, you know, we no longer really saw the father go to work in the field. We didn't see him. We didn't see the fruit of his labor.
Right.
We knew that he worked, right? And we knew he provided for the family, but we were at home, you know, consuming this instant gratification life.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we have a lot we need to kind of reconcile. And sometimes what we saw of our father was, you know, maybe some of the negatives,
right?
The darkness, the shadows, his anger.
Right.
And what that does is it leaves an imprint on us.
It does.
And our goal as fathers and as men is to become better than the previous version.
Right.
Right. It's funny how your dad is probably the only person, when you get better than him, that's cheering for you.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. And you always hear that. You always like, hope that your own children attain a better or a higher level than you.
Yeah.
And in return, you want to attain a higher level than your parents, especially your dad, especially your father. Yeah. But what usually happens, I believe, is like we put our dads on this pedestal, right? We put them on this like level because we think they're never supposed to make mistakes. They're never there's guys that go to work every day, they do the right thing, and when they make mistakes, we almost hold them to this like level of frustration in myself. Like I'd get frustrated because my dad would make these mistakes, and I'd think, "What? Why would you do that? Why would you make these mistakes?" But in all reality, he's just another human. He's just another man that makes mistakes. Right. We expect our own children to give us breaks, to cut us slacks, right? Like, hey, man, sorry about that. I shouldn't have done that. I apologize to you. And it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting dynamic because of this lack of father, dad in my own eyes. But he was there. He had certain characteristics that he put into me. And there's times when I'm like, man, I sound just like my dad.
Yeah. You know? That's interesting because as I've kind of done some of my own work, you know, kind of building my own emotional intelligence, I've had to really revisit the relationship with father, right? Like, you know, there are these archetypes of fathers, right? There's the alcoholic father that's violent, and that can leave an imprint on a child that's very negative, right? There's the father that's so perfect that, you know, he makes all the money, he provides for the family, he's just this icon in the community. How do I live up to that image, father, right? So, you know, and then there's the father that is just, maybe he goes to work, he plops down on the sofa, and mom makes all the decisions, right? The passive father, right? And so what are we learning from our fathers? What do we integrate from our fathers? What work do we need to go back and look at to sit with and think, you know, do the work to actually say, what did my father leave me? What did his anger look like? How does his anger show up in my relationship with my children? Right. You know, how was what were his relationship with finances? How did he treat women? We have to sit down and look at where we got some of this stuff. And a lot of that does come from the father. Right. And like you said, oftentimes we put the fathers on the pedestal. Right. I, like you, have, my relationship with my father was very much a wave. It had highs and it had lows. My parents split when I was fairly young. And so a lot of the narrative that I heard about my father was what my mother would, stories my mother would tell. Right. And I don't know that she necessarily had a correct or good or she had her experience. Right. And she imparted upon me her experience. And what I saw from my father was very different than what I experienced was very different. Right. And so what I've had to go back and do is kind of do this kind of reconciliation. Right. Look at look exactly what does my anger look like? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Where did that come from? And you, as you go in and you start to, because some people they may not even resonate with you and I because they had such a great experience with their dads that they may be like, man, I'm so lucky that I had that I had this relationship with my dad, because I believe like the relationship with your father needs to be a strong relationship, and you need to have strong core values from your dad. Even though my dad was not around, I believe he still has strong values that his family generationally passed on, which subsequently passed on to me. Right. Same, my parents, they divorced pretty early in my life. And then my dad was gone. He was just gone. He was just not there, which had its own effects on me and my relationship with people, because I was angry. I was very angry right away, right? But as you grow and as you look back and you think about these things and you look at your core values, you look at the things that are passed on to you, you got them from somewhere, right? And you do the work, you put in the time, and you realize that most of these things come genetically, some genetic code, whatever was passed from your grandpa to your dad. Yeah. It's a genetic code, right? And so that's how I look at it. And then we make small adjustments, small tweaks to our own children. Right. And we have this, I tell my kids all the time, like,
you have two different dads.
Yeah.
And it's not true. I mean, like it's the way that I say it because I had Braxton when I was 18. So right out of high school, we had him, and I had no idea.
Right.
I was in such a searching place of myself.
Yeah.
I had no idea how to raise.
You couldn't give what you didn't have.
Oh man. And I was terrified that I was going to be like my dad.
Yeah.
In all reality, I was a lot like my dad.
You can't prevent it. Right?
Yeah.
Like you can't, there's a nature to it. Right. And it's not a bad thing. Right. Yeah. We can learn via negativa,
sure.
via in kind of in the areas of seeing, hey, maybe my dad had this habit and I don't want that habit.
Yeah.
Right. But we absorb so much from those formative years of them raising us that it's inevitable that we are going to pick up those traits.
Right.
Right. But how do we reconcile? Because I think one of the natural aspects of a son is to rebel.
Right.
To rebel against the father.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to. I think it's part of a rite of passage to rebel against your father, find your own way. And then eventually I think you circle back.
Yeah. You complete the circle.
You complete the circle.
Professor said that the other day in jiu-jitsu. He was talking about completing the circle. He was talking about a judo throw. And it kind of resonated with me with life because everything does circle back. Mm-hmm. Everything comes back to a point that you started, and you kind of go on your own travel, like you're talking about. Like back in the day, we talked about this the first episode. Sons used to go on their own. Like if you were Native American, you went on your own walkabout. Or you went on your own walkabout. You went with other men who taught you these qualities of the tribe or whatever they thought, and your father entrusted them. But then you would circle back. And you would come back to your dad, and hopefully you learned these great traits and these great things that your dad could just now help like solidify and to help refine these things. And it was interesting to me, like to be able to circle back and think about like those things. Cause you do rebel against your father. You do 100%.
I mean, you have to. I think it's in our nature to kind of challenge what he has taught you, because again, I think naturally we as humans, we're curious, right? Sure. And we have to figure things out on our own to an extent, right? We know once we've experienced a hot stove or we see somebody experience a hot stove, we don't necessarily have to do that, but that requires a certain level of emotional maturity,
sure,
which we don't always have, especially in our teenage years.
Yeah, right.
When we really start to rebel, when we really start to see, and it's interesting because we live in the society we now do. We're no longer hunter gatherer. We're more consumerist, right? Like we don't have those rites of passage, right? We don't see our fathers, cobbling shoes. We don't see our dad working in the field. We don't see our dad laying bricks or being a blacksmith,
right?
A lot of dads do intellectual work, right? And that doesn't necessarily I don't mean to devalue it,
right?
But I think it's important for us to see our fathers as sons, see our fathers doing that work.
Right.
I think one of the greatest, gifts my father gave me, he was a very hard worker.
Right.
He was, painted houses his whole life, and he worked really, really hard. And I'm sure that wasn't something he was incredibly passionate about,
right,
but he was good at it. He had it down to a science, and he worked hard at it, and he provided for our family. And to a level, that is kind of the requirement, to be a father, is you have to provide.
Right.
But I also remember his anger being very, being very volatile at times.
Yeah.
Right. Like I remember, I took his truck for a little joyride one summer's eve while he was out of town. And he drove this beautiful, Ford F-350, lifted on 37s. And of course, my buddy got his truck stuck.
Oh man.
And, I was like, I know how we can get it out. My dad was a painter. He carried tons of paint in the back of his truck, and my teenage brain didn't even think, I just fired that baby up.
Let's go.
You could follow the paint trail from when the paint fell over the back.
That's awesome.
To where we went all the way back to
your house,
right into the driveway.
Oh, wow.
And I just remember, he tanned my hide.
Yeah. He was not happy.
He was not happy.
Yeah.
Cause it And to me, it was fun.
Sure.
But to him, it was business, right? It was work. It was lost profits in the paint. And I just, as a teenager, I didn't see it. I just saw a pretty badass truck I wanted to drive.
And you met your father.
Yeah.
Yeah. He tuned you up.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so funny. Cause, you know, and I'm sure your dad has like his own version of that story of what he felt he needed to teach you a lesson on, because could you imagine if it was somebody else's truck or something else happened, or let's say like something worse had happened, you know, like
exactly.
I think about that like too, because my dad, he definitely had a temper, but he was like a leader. Mm-hmm. He in his job, he was in the military. He was 20 plus years in the military, right? Mm-hmm. And his dad, military, they all were they were military driven. He would take us to to his barracks because he was a drill sergeant, and he would have us come to work with him. And I remember seeing him and thinking, man, he could control a room. And I think I have that ability to from myself. Like, I think I can control.
Of course you do. Yeah.
And so
of course you do.
I had to get it from somewhere, right? Like,
yeah.
And so he did pass on some good qualities.
Yeah.
I definitely never got disciplined by my dad because he just wasn't there, you know?
Yeah.
And so I had to learn the hard way. My mom, she did a good job, but I also had a lot of very strong men around me.
Yeah.
So like that idea that, I had my grandpas, I had my uncles. Yeah.
Community of fathers.
And man, they would for sure tune me up if I got out of line and push me to do other things, which was great. I'm grateful for them because my life could have been completely different had I not had these strong men who still to this day, I can remember them correcting me very clearly you know, about life.
It's interesting. And you probably have examples of this from the wrestling mat, but like I remember coaching lacrosse, specifically in the youth. The boys who had single mothers, whose moms were dropping them off, were picking them up. You know, I remember them challenging me. I remember them, you know, sometimes standing too close, or like they were looking for that figure. Yeah. You know, and a lot of it just had to do with the father wasn't there full time, right? Like getting your father part-time, it's not enough.
Right.
It's not enough. It's one of the biggest heartbreaks in my life. Right.
Right.
You know, not being able to be there and nurture and care for this thing that I've created.
Yeah.
And they're looking for it. They need it, especially in the 8, 9, 10 year range. I really do believe that they need, you know, they need those mentors.
Yeah, for sure.
And they can get it. I just wonder if it has to do with the fact that communities are so hard to find these days.
Yeah. Well, and so, yes, you're right. So in the wrestling community, you have these. So in the wrestling community, your dad most of the time becomes your coach. And it's not that the coach doesn't want to help you, but a lot of times the coach will say the tough relationships are the father-son. Some guys pull it off. Some dads can pull it off. My older son, I was good with. Tristan, not so good with. Him and we have like the same kind of personality. But you would see these younger kids who didn't have that same thing kind of gravitate towards you. And what happens then is you can practice different skill sets, different things on these young men, and start to change how you handle your own children on the mat. I did not coach Tristan very long in wrestling just because it wasn't working out. We weren't.
Well, I think that's true. You need some help. At some point you need help. I think I reached the same level with Ben, like where I knew that perhaps I was pushing him in a direction that, you know, I couldn't coach him anymore. I just couldn't coach him because I was pushing my dream or my expectation of him, of what I was hoping he would become, right? Like living vicariously through him. Very talented young man. You know, I knew if I kept pushing, he would just crack.
Right.
He would just crack.
And that's such a big thing, like that we were talking about, Tyler and I, that these changes that you make as you grow as a dad, as you grow as a father, are so valuable and they're so real, and you have to be in the moment of changing. Right. The version that Braxton got is not the version that Tristan got. The version that their fathers are completely different. So Tristan wasn't able to make the weight because I didn't stay on top of his diet. I would advise him what to do, and I would tell him what to do. I would tell him to drink his water because for most of you guys that know, and this is just a quick synopsis of it, but in grappling, there's weight classes, right? And I think we've already touched on this, that Tyler and I both have cut weight to make our weight classes for a competition. It's not fun. You suffer a little bit. You go through you have to do some diet stuff. And what the goal is to not do it unhealthily. Yeah. So I tell Tristan that. Braxton, I would force him to do things that he was not, that he could not tell me no, because he trusted what I told him, but it was miserable. He suffered, and he suffered bad. He would make the weight, but it was not healthy. And I was the kind of dad where I'd be like, nope, you're making the weight. Yeah. And if you don't make the weight, you'll make the weight the next day.
Yeah. And this is a good question. And perhaps we'll have an episode just on this topic, but like, how much external discipline is needed for someone to build that internal discipline?
Oh man. So you have to, you have to live your life. Your lifestyle changes for almost, well. And so what we would do is, as a family, because Braxton was cutting so hard, we would all make adjustments, because how unfortunate is it for me to sit there and eat a hamburger in front of him when he can eat a piece of chicken and some salad. So your external disciplines, I mean, it has to be full buy-in, right? Full buy-in for this. And I remember thinking, and when Tristan was going through wrestling, thinking, man, I just don't have the energy to do that to somebody. Because what happened is Braxton made it to a very high level. And then when it was his choice, he just stopped. Mm-hmm. He stopped wrestling. Hasn't been on the mat. He struggles to get on the mat now to this day. Man. You see him, he comes in and he's excited, but he struggles. He struggles to get on there because it brings up some negative feelings, and you hate that. Like you were saying, you don't want to break your kids of that. Yeah. And so you have to make adjustments. Yeah. And I'm sure like our listeners and our friends can apply this to anything. And sometimes you get lucky, you have a great coach, and your kids can attach to that coach, and man, maybe that kid like soars, right? And it's one of those things that you have to discipline yourself as a father to see these negativities.
So again, it comes back to that taking it full circle. It wasn't until I had children of my own that I started to take a good moral inventory of what did my father really teach me. Yeah. These kids don't come with manuals.
Oh man. Could you imagine if they did?
Right.
Awesome.
Right. Well, I mean, we have some sort of internal attunement that we've witnessed, right? Because we tend to follow the examples that we have. Yeah. Whether it be other men or other, groups of men that are with us, or our own fathers, right? We are going to replicate that behavior because that's
for sure. 100%.
We take our own time to rebel. Dad's ideas are stupid. Father's ideas are stupid. I know better than father, right? Yeah. And when we come back, as part of our reconciliation process, we have to go back and understand Dad wasn't perfect.
Right. Yeah. Gosh. So true. It's 100% true. Yeah. Then you realize, then you make that, even though like we've talked about before, that even though our dads made mistakes, like they're just our dads. Yeah. And you can look at them differently. You can like start to look at your dad different and go, man, I can find some common ground with you, and I'm sure you did the same thing with your dad that I did with my dad. I did have to come to some terms to accept my dad for who he is, 100%. He's not going to be he is never going to reach the pedestal that I want him to or expect him to. Yeah. And so I have to look at him and accept him for who he is, for the man that he is, and then be grateful for the fact that he's my dad. Yeah. You have to reframe, right? You have to reframe. It's interesting that the idea of frames, and I had this conversation with my mother earlier today, but like reframing the idea that we have of our fathers, right? When we talk about framing a picture, as you're taking a picture in a camera, right? You frame up the picture, and what you capture in that frame is what you capture. But if you move it a little bit, you get a completely different picture. Yeah. Right. And so she was asking me today, like how, when
I sent her a video of somebody doing a muffle choke on me. And she was like, were you just resisting that? And I was like, well, what you resist persists. Right. If I resist it, that is not really going to get me anywhere. It's just going to get me tired.
Yeah.
So I have to fight to a better position. I have to fight and get my frames underneath me. I have to change and reframe.
Yeah.
And again, it just comes back to like the concept of framing. We have to change our position.
Right. And it can change energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like good frames, a good frame. Like you take a good picture, you look at that picture and you can see, and you can put yourself in that picture. Yeah. Same thing with framing any kind of jiu-jitsu move, right? It changes the energy.
Yeah.
The guy may not be able to put all the energy. He may not be able to get his hand on your mouth and muffle choke you.
Exactly.
It's such a weird thing. Yeah. And whenever you look at those things and you what the other thing about that is you're able to look back and take a different look at maybe our childhoods, maybe the situations that we were put in, maybe the fact that you're able to now forgive and reframe what your dad was going through. Because maybe what he was going through, he was just in the moment. Like he was just surviving.
Yeah. I think for me too, as I did that inventory, as I asked myself those questions, and I had to sit and take an honest inventory, literally sit down. I did some journaling. I found some very good questions inside of Connor Beeson's book, Man Talks. Shout out to his podcast and the work he does. Huge inspiration here. But sitting down and actually asking myself these questions, I started to have a little bit more compassion.
Right.
I started to see, what? The resistance I'm feeling is my resistance.
Sure.
And if I keep resisting it, it's gonna persist.
Right.
If I reframe, then I change the relationship. I change the relationship. I'm fighting to better position.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm fighting to better position. And now I can look at my relationship with my father and I can say, we don't always agree on everything. We have a lot of different conflicting opinions and different views, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But what I do have is a healthy respect for his very best effort.
Right.
Because he gave me what he had to give me.
Yeah.
Right. And what I learned is that, those experiences, they just led to better self-knowledge.
Right.
Better self-awareness, better emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And if we circle it back to jiu-jitsu, right? Yeah. What's our number one job? To stay healthy.
Yeah.
Right. And your next job is to not get hurt. Next job, find opportunity. And as you and our listeners, as you look at things that you're not happy with, number one thing you have to remember, stay healthy.
Stay healthy.
Stay healthy. Look at it from healthy eyes, not unhealthy eyes. Look at it from eyes and a position that you can accept fault and not just put blame.
Right.
Which is what I had to do with my dad.
Right. And do you and do you ever catch yourself in a quiet moment where you say something, you're like, wait, that sounds like something my dad would say.
Always. Yeah.
I had one just the other day. I said something like, I work my ass off. And I'm like, I could, even in my head, the voice inside my head was my father's voice. And I'm like, it made me chuckle a little bit because he did. He worked his butt off.
Yeah.
But that was a term he would always use.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the hard work he put in and what he gave me. The next level is for me to do it better.
Sure.
For me to do it better.
Yeah. And we have to, like we said, take inventory of where we're at in our lives, look back on our lives and say, are we making progress? Not progress like, man, climbing that hill because sometimes it's a false summit, right?
Yeah.
But looking back and going, man, I'm still making forward progress.
Yep.
And as dads and as fathers, we are going to be put on a pedestal that our children are going to want to either mirror and mimic, right? And we got to take what we've learned and what we can grow, because like we said, we are around strong-minded men. I myself was that kid who would attach himself to men, who would attach himself to different versions of men that I liked. Sometimes, I had to change some things because in my early life, I was getting into fights a lot. But my but that was kind of the men that I was around. I was fighting a lot, you know?
Yeah.
And now, I mirror and mimic a lot of the guys that I'm around now. And they're like such good dudes, you know, and they have such good relationship with their children. And I watch them and I'm thinking, I'm so grateful that my boys like accepted me for my faults, you know, and they're like, they still, they'll call me and they, you know, we tell each other we love each other all the time. And I know that they give me a pass a lot.
So, you know, Braxton got a different dad than Tripp.
Right.
What did you do anything in particular by way of repair, or do you feel like you needed to do anything in the way of repair? Because I feel like obviously, you know, that's one of the markers of a good father is that they recognize even in between children that they can do better. Right. And it is unfortunate, you know, that each child does kind of get their own experience with dad, but like it's also their ability to build their own frame. But what responsibility do you have as a father to go back and you know, reconcile and repair?
Sure. So me personally, Braxton and I had lots of conversations, lots of sometimes very frustrated, angry conversations from Braxton's side because he did not like some of the things that I did. So if you hear those things from your children, if you hear those things from people, you have to not reflect. Mm-hmm. Do not reflect that. Like, listen, one thing that I learned from, and I can't remember the book, and it might have been from our friend Audrey, but it was to give children the voice, give them a voice, and then take what they're saying and don't think about it as negative. Just listen to their voice and give them a voice. And I remember thinking, you know, I'm just going to give them a voice.
Just listen.
Whatever they say, I'm not going to take any kind of emotion on it. I'm just going to listen to them. And once I started to do that with Braxton, especially, he was able to really let me know how he felt through those early years, because he still tells to this day, he really enjoyed wrestling. Yeah. He really loved wrestling and he was really good at it. Yeah. And the things that he hated the most was cutting.
He's a very self-disciplined person,
He's
right?
Very self-disciplined.
Right. Like the few interactions I've had with him, I'm like really impressed by that trait in him.
Yeah, he is. He strives to be the best in everything. Mm-hmm. He won a bunch of awards through the military so far because he was the best. And that is something that we instilled in him. But the way that we did was by way of like force and struggling. Wrestling teaches you those struggles in the first place, right? Yeah. And so after Braxton and I had those conversations, all I did was self-reflect. I self-reflected, and then I made changes by one. Anytime I see Tristan, because Tristan and I train, you know, we train almost every day with each other, right, in jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And I tell Tristan all the time, if you ever feel like it's your dad training with you, if you ever feel like I'm bringing something from what happened at home onto the mat, let me know. Yeah. Because at that moment, I'll stop, because that's not fun for him. He's just going to think that I'm his dad trying to kick his ass. Yeah. Because he didn't clean his room up at home. Yeah. You know? Yeah. I mean, not that I could kick Tristan's ass anymore because he's talented, but I can feel when he feels my energy is off, and I'll just make those changes because it's not fair to him. And he's 19, so he can't really formulate the words like a 25-year-old, 26-year-old Braxton can formulate to me, you know? Yeah.
The emotional intelligence. So having some emotional intelligence in yourself to know when to let your child talk and listen. Set your ego aside. Yeah. Man, sounds familiar, right? Just like you're stepping on the mat, right? Yeah, like you set your ego aside with your children. Yeah. And listen to what they have to say.
Yeah. And for you, especially like, because so I only have the boys, but you have two girls, then Ben in the middle. Yeah. So you have Bryn, who's older, your first child. And so you made some mistakes with Bryn, and then you have Ben, but then you have Cozy. Yeah. So your relationships with those three are like completely different, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And gender specific. Like I am fully prepared as a father to always be there as a father, as a dad to Bryn and Cozy. Right. Like, and that would mean like flying out there to protect them from something, or, picking them up to give them advice, or helping them shop for cars. Whereas Ben, I know at some point I have to push him out of the nest and say, you have to fly on your own a little bit because you have to repeat this process.
Right.
Whether or not that's the correct gender roles today, I don't know, but that's just what I'm prepared to do. Right. Yeah. Like, it is very different. They not only they get a different father, they get a little bit different version of me because, as what John Mayer says, fathers, be good to your daughters.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you want your girls to find men who are like you.
Yeah.
Right?
Better than me. But yeah, I want somebody that, has the qualities that I have as a man. And so I'll be damned if I'm not pushing myself to be the best version of myself all the time. But yeah, I also want Ben to be that man for some young lady at some point. So,
and we, as we, go on these roles and we reflect back to our audience, I think like we're old school. We definitely are old school with our thoughts.
Yeah.
We have old school thinking with new school thoughts of like, find mentors.
Yeah.
Find people if you had a great father, man, thank him.
Yeah.
If you had a father that you're like, thank you for giving me this platform to be better than you.
Yeah. If you didn't have a good father, create an inventory.
Create an inventory.
Create an inventory of what it is and find out what you're resisting. Find out what the shadow is and address it.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
It reminds me of that on Big Daddy. I don't know if everybody's seen Big Daddy, but
spoiler
if you
alert.
remember, like
spoilers.
He's talking to the kid and they're seeing a guy walk past. And I can't remember exactly what they say to him, but the guy snaps at him and he's like, rah! And Adam Sandler says, it's okay. You're not mad at me. You're mad at your dad. And the guy goes, I am mad at my dad. Yes. And you think, what are you mad at your dad about? And can you give him a pass?
Yeah.
Can you give him a break? My relationship with my dad is what it is. It's better. We still, I'll talk to him maybe twice a year. But that's just because we don't have that relationship where I call him for dad advice. There are some men that I call for advice. Luckily I have some men that I'm still able to reach out to. My grandfathers are both, one passed away, and then my grandpa, my mom's dad, he's still there. He's great. He'll ask me how we're doing in jiu-jitsu and stuff. And he loves it. He was a boxer for the Navy. And he loves fighting, that kind of thing. So make sure you have that mentor. Make sure you have the people around you that you can mirror and mimic when you take inventory, that you can fill those little voids or encourage the growth that you already have when you're being a dad. If you are making mistakes, remember, like, your children are going to just get different versions of their dad.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we're in Utah, so a lot of people have a lot of kids. I would giggle because what if you have one that's like, there's a 20-year gap between your children,
right?
And the last kid is like, he's getting raised by the oldest kids, you know?
Yeah.
Especially like because we're in Utah. And those of you in Utah, you'll get the 8-kid
families that happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And just going back, like, I know, like, Tyler was talking about his dad. I met his dad at Bryn's party, and he was great.
No, I definitely have had my own rocky rebellion and my own, I'm smarter than you, but I think at the end of the day, like, I have to accept him for what he gave me. And I do accept him. I appreciate the quality of hard work, the love and the care. And, it hasn't always been easy.
Sure.
I'm sure I haven't always been the easiest son to love, right? Like, but I have had to come full circle and realize he didn't have an instruction manual.
Yeah, he didn't.
And
nobody's given an instruction manual.
As much as I let myself off the hook, I need to let the people in my life that I care about and that I want in my life off the hook as
Agreed.
well.
Yeah. Don't tap them like, no. Yeah. Don't break the arm.
Don't break the arm.
And whenever Doug comes into town, let him drive your Bronco and have a good time with it.
I don't know. He's got to let me drive the vet, though. That's got to be the swap.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is a good one.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we
appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Pander, and let's wrap up this episode with what's next.
Yeah, so let's see. We have a couple things. We will be doing the Utah 1033rd Foundation, the fundraiser this weekend. It's Saturday, and it starts at 6 p.m. We have the open mat 6 to 8. It's $10 to get in, $10 to the open mat, so adults only. And come in. All academies, all affiliates, all jiu-jitsu practitioners welcome. Let's try to fill the mats and feel that it's a family friendly event. We're gonna have live bands, food,
happy hamburgers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man, I've heard so much about this.
They're so delicious.
Yeah. So we have Purple Belt Patrick from the Lehigh Academy, and they have their own hamburgers. This I've heard from multiple people. Even Professor said yesterday, how good could a hamburger be?
Right.
And then he goes, man, it was a good hamburger.
It was a great hamburger. It was a great hamburger.
Yeah.
I bet if he sells enough hamburgers, we can talk him into selling fries too.
Awesome.
I don't know yet.
Yeah. And so the two bands we're going to have there, I've heard are really good. And
so we got Hail Mary.
And then I'm going to mess up the other name, Holly and Paul.
We'll shout them out socials. We'll shout them out on socials.
We'll figure it out. And then let's see here. We're in the next couple of weeks, we're still working on our men's group.
Yep.
We will be doing coaching seminars.
Yep.
Breathing workshops. And we still want to have our fans and friends, anybody come out, give us some ideas, give us some content. Yeah. Let us know what you're doing.
Yeah. If you're struggling, hit us up on socials. You can always hit up Lost Boy Scouts on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, email, website. We're all there. Danny, where do they get a hold of you?
So I'm still compassionate_gentleman, and then train Park City Jiu-Jitsu. You guys know that Lehigh and at the Park City Academy. Sundays, open mat. If you have any ideas, you want to come show us your jiu-jitsu, come show us your techniques.
Yeah.
Come give us some insight of what we may say that you happy about, disagree with. Yeah. We're interested.
Or hit us up in the comments. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate you.
Take care. See you guys next.
Appreciate you.
See you, buddy.
Rise up, don't turn it back.